Welcome to Safety Chats. Host Jason Stark, Director of Safety at Baldwin Safety and Compliance, shares decades of aviation experience and a passion for safety. Let's get started with this week's Safety Chat.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jason Stark, and I'm thrilled to announce that this week's podcast features Mark Myers. He'll be sharing valuable insights on safety leadership that I'm sure you'll find both informative and inspiring.
Well, there are at least 6 key dimensions that drive a proactive safety culture. These include reporting, justness, learning, accountability, and trust, citizenship. And in today's episode, we'll talk about leadership. Well, hello, I'm Mark Myers. I'm Senior Safety Manager with Baldwin Safety and Compliance. And today we'll be exploring how to create and maintain a living culture of safety and risk management from a leadership perspective. That's a key tenet which framed my career for mission for my last 2 decades. And I'd like to introduce to you today Jim Adams, who was the architect of this tenet and the visionary safety leader of leaders. Jim is an industry spokesperson, healthcare CEO, executive chairman and board of directors, strategic planner, and organizational development expert, and most recently, a leadership coach. Hey, so welcome to Baldwin Podcast, Jim.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much. I mean, it's great to connect with you. I think, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm excited to do this.
Well, Jim, I had the pleasure of working with you as a director of safety while you were CEO of probably one of the country's leading medical transport companies. This was back in the time when industry was moving to implement an SMS well ahead of the regulatory requirements. And we'll unpack all of this in just a few minutes. But Jim, first, would you care to share some of your background? And I especially like what took you from being a flight nurse to becoming an executive board chairman and a leadership advisor.
Wow. There's a lot there. I was thinking about what that is. And I think, the first thing for me was when I got into nursing I'm a type A person. So I figured it was a good way to keep my adrenaline going. But I know it may sound like a cliche, but I truly believe that, serving and helping people, there's something to that. And so being a critical care nurse and an emergency nurse and flying really gave me that opportunity. But at the same time, I was working in the hospitals, kind of moving up the career ladder. And one of the things that just drove me nuts was that the people who were making all the decisions and that were driving strategy and process, they weren't bad people at all. They certainly weren't bad people, but they just were so far removed from what takes place day to day and how culture impacts or lack of culture can impact how people actually perform and how they think about their work and what they do. So I don't know, that drove me crazy. So I went back to grad school and made sure I could go down that path. And I did. And I think I feel much better about it myself. I learned a lot and I think it helped me to gain a better perspective of what are the challenges from the executive side. Just when you're looking at the executive, you think they know everything. When you become one, you realize how little you really know. So it's good. And that's really what drove me to get there.
That is just fascinating. Jim, you were then working in the hospital, and your leadership there was probably in Northern California, I think in Santa Rosa. So tell me about the hospital roles that you did and where that started going with managing the culture of patient care and patient.
So I started off as a clinical nurse in the critical care, then went to emergency medicine and emergency nursing, loved it and thought I understood patient safety. I worked my way through. We organized and put together a trauma center, which took 3 years to do, and tons of data around that and lots of safety questions and quality of care. And then eventually was the COO of the 3 hospital system. And I thought we were great. I'll be honest with you. I thought there's no room for improvement. We got good scores and everything. But it's really not about the scores. It's about, is there meaning behind the work? Is there value behind the work? And so I really started looking at it saying, I think we might provide a good quality of care, but what are we really doing that? How do we know that? And for me, the very question was why? Why are we doing what we do? Does it really make the patient's life better? Does it make it safer? Or is this just nothing more than, check boxes so that the regulatory bodies feel like all these guys are great. They're doing all their stuff, but it was very transactional to me. And so I really had a calling to move from transactional, kind of a transformational state where it really meant something to worry about quality and safety.
Wow.
Years later, I actually, after I left the hospital, I was asked to join the hospital board. And so I did. And I chaired the safety and quality committee of that for 6 years. And I was chair for the last 2. And it just reopened my eyes. And I think this happens in all industry and all sectors and professions, that you're experts at what you do. So you think the only way to get better is to listen internally and not look externally to other people and other industries who have had similar problems. I mean, hospitals are complex organizations with many moving pieces, but so is aviation, right? So is mining, so is ships. I mean, but they won't look outside. So for me, it was a way to wake up and go, like, "Oh, there's actually really good information outside of the hospital that we should be using in the hospital." So but that's really why I think what got me on the path to do that. And I think it helps because you become sincere in what you're doing. I didn't want to make sure that, infection rates are going down just so that, there was a checkbox. I wanted to understand, why were we getting infections in the first place?
Right.
And how do we prevent them way back sooner than treating this thing at the end? So I think that's probably the thing that really got me going.
Touching base on your flight nurse career too, I think you're flying for a company that then you came back to be actually a CEO on. That's the point, another dimension of envisioning of how safety management works in another operation. Lots of high organization, lots of pieces moving, what it is, a lot of high risk. And again, patient health and safety, and then probably crew management and crew health and safety at the same time. So
Absolutely. You're so true. And I think we're seeing more of that now. I think we're seeing the acceptance within different professions that look outside themselves to learn, but there's still a long way to go. Put it that way.
well, part of what I work on is I'm finding myself continuing to blog and train and write advisories on what is really required of an accountable executive. And Jim, I think you just started touching on that. From your perspective, what does it mean when you are signing a safety policy in the accountable executive letter that addresses what you'll do for the company of employees that you're running? What goes through your head at that point?
I would have told you early in my career that it was me signing off saying, "Yeah, let's do it. Go make it happen." Now, in my time when I was with the Reach, I feel a personal sense of obligation when I sign that. It has to be something that I believe in, that I believe is correct, and that I'm willing to stand up and take a beating for it, quite frankly, if I don't do it. I want the employees to do that. So we must have policies and procedures and operating and standard operating. Those are very important pieces, but they're just pieces. Until you put all those pieces together, they really don't have the intended meaning, quite frankly. They're just another transactional thing. Like, policy comes out, the CEO signs it. This is what we're going to do. And I think employees look at that and say, look, is that top down? How does this guy really know it? And the size of the organization certainly makes it challenging. Large organizations are certainly, tougher than it is in a smaller one. But quite frankly, it's tough in small ones too, right? There's limited resources and so forth. So, but when I would write my name on something and sign it, I owned it, quite frankly. And that was for me, what the difference was, is that as a CEO, I owned it. I wasn't asking those in those roles to own it. I wanted to own it as well.
You touched on size. I know that the company grew that you were CEO of in many, many states with regional bases and
Yeah.
different types of operations associated with that. So let's go from your advice to small operators who wears many hats, and what advice would you give that to an SMS AE letter, and then advice to the larger operator with multiple ships, locations, regions,
Sure.
and all the complexity? How do you implement and stay visible and true to what that letter means?
Man, that is
All right.
probably one of the hardest questions and the hardest things to do. I think, as you will remember, one of the things that I quickly in my career, when I was the CEO, you hire new employees. And I have said from the get-go that the moment that we hire somebody new, I don't care how much experience they have, we now, as the employer, have an obligation. We have an obligation to that employee to work with them and to bring them something that's valued to them, not just you hire them, you put them through orientation, and you send them out to work. If we're going to hire people to work in high risk jobs or high intensity jobs, then we need to reward them for that. But we also need to teach them for that and help them with that and own that, because if I don't own it, they're certainly not going to want to own it. And so it can be tough. And we have a distributed workforce. It makes it harder. I guess what I would say for both large and small is you got to start at the beginning, and you got to put a stake in the ground, and you got to say, from this point forward, we're going to change the way we do things, and let's be very truthful about it. So one of the things we implemented immediately was, as you get a new job, you come to a company, and first thing that happens is your HR. You sit in a room, they come in and you go through reams of paperwork, and here's what you're going to do, and blah, blah, blah. And then depending on which skill set you are, You're going to go to some orientation somewhere else. And I mean, that's just the way it happens. It always does. What I did was I said, look, we don't need all that HR stuff at the very beginning. I mean, come on, we've already hired these people. We know much about them. So what we did is we went in, me, myself, COO, our chief medical officer, when we were at Reach would come, the chief financial officer would come in, you would come in, and we would meet these brand new employees. So they're meeting with the most senior people in the company. And we're actually talking about why safety and culture are such a high value to us. It's my obligation to create a culture in an organization where quality and safety are not just simply things that we have to do for regulatory reasons or for certification reasons and professional organizations, but we do it because we believe it. And once you start to believe something, it becomes part of your DNA, and it influences people next to you in their DNA, even those people that are kind of hard to drag along over a period of time. I mean, they're just surrounded. So they really do it. So I think it begins at the beginning. Now, look, if I'm the CEO of a large air manufacturer with lots and lots of places, is it for me to do that? Maybe not, but maybe so. Maybe there is a way that I can do that. But I certainly then have an obligation to ensure that the leadership team that we've built and the person who's accountable at that level feels the same way I do and has that same message and carries it through. Because, you and I probably have all worked in places where there was the division in leadership. One guy would say this, but the guy at the ground floor would say like, yeah, don't really do that. That's what they say. And can't have that, because when you do, you're introducing so many potential parts for or places for things to go wrong. So I think it starts at the beginning, and I think you have to set that tone, but the harder part probably isn't after you set it, it's maintaining it. And so I think you start with the leadership team and your management team. You do as much work with them as you would do any new employee. And I remember when we kind of changed practice, I got a lot of grief from people saying, that's crazy. What are we going to do it like this for? And these vulnerabilities that you want to share. And it turned out to be probably one of the best things that ever happened to the company, because it allowed the management team to realize the staff really do care. They're not just there for a paycheck. They care about what they're doing. And so we have an obligation to help them be successful in that. And so you just have to do it. I think the hardest part, though, is keeping it up. I don't know how to say this any way, is that you have to build people in your organization that believe the same thing you do. So they're able to convey that message on a daily basis. And then I think it's important for the executives to have touch points. I don't care how many places you have. There's got to be a way that you can have reflection points with your staff, whether it's traveling someplace, whether it's recording something, whether it's writing something and sending up, but it has to be personal. It has to be something where the employee believes there's meaning behind it, not just a rubber stamp to move it out. So, but I think that's the same in both companies, whether large or small. I'm a small operator and I have very limited resources. I think if I own the company, or if I'm the person that's been asked to run the company, you have to take that obligation on. It's your obligation to drive the message through, whether you're small or not. And you have to do it. You scale to what you can do, like frankly. You have to start by setting the tone that we're gonna do this. And it's okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's how we learn from those mistakes. It's how we take those mistakes and create a better system going forward. And you can't do that if people aren't willing to say, hey, I made a mistake. I remember something that we did that I found remarkable. We were part of an early stage safety organization of companies around the United States. And we created a new way of reporting, as you're aware of. And we went out and we talked to everybody. We said, listen, we're serious. If you see things that potential risk, if you've experienced something, we need to hear about it. And, it's tough at first, get slow going. But I remember we were probably a year in and we went to a symposium where all the companies got together and shared their data. And we had the highest forwarded incidents in our safety system of any company, probably by about fourfold. And so people said, oh my God, you guys are dangerous. And I said, to the contrary, we have 4 times as many, because people are submitting really meaningful things to us, things that I may not have ever thought of, things or risks that if you're working in this division or if you're working in this location, you have fundamental core values that you believe, but you have different risk profiles that get introduced. And so you have to address those. And so I actually felt so good when I found out we were getting all these things in. The challenge then was people need an answer when you do that. If you just do things like that, if people submit and they don't really feel like it's getting anywhere, they quit doing it. So part of the culture is if you ask, you better be ready to jump in and work, right? If you do a survey of your employees, then you better be ready to answer what's found in that survey, not just do the survey for sake of survey. So anyway, I think I get off my soapbox, but yeah, I think it starts at the beginning. And I think There's challenges with size, but I think if you can drive a message through your team, then you got to build a good team and get on the same page where there's meaning and value behind what you're doing. It's not just filling a box.
I remember the safety metrics of even taking this to the board. And when reporting rates would go down, they'd start asking questions. And so that helped you educate what the board was looking for also, didn't it?
It did. I think, yeah, absolutely. Boards are oftentimes very smart people from diverse backgrounds, but they may not actually understand the nuances of what you do. And so when we started sharing data with the board, they had the same reaction. They said, well, how does this compare to your peers? It's twice that. We have probably 4 times as many, and their heads started spinning. And again, I said, listen, it's a great thing. It's because we're getting good information that we can do. So I think when the reports came back and they started to drift, even the board members suddenly went, hey, what's going on here, board? Did we miss something? I'm going to share. This is an example, though, of where I think leadership has a role of educating everybody. I'm sure you remember this, but we had a helicopter that one of our mechanics found a very, very small crack in the tail boom. He dive penetrated it, and sure enough, there was a crack. And so the tail boom came off the aircraft, and that aircraft's down, and I got a aircraft sitting somewhere with a new tail boom and an expensive thing I got to go buy. And could we flown the aircraft? I'm going to tell you, I think there's a lot of people, because of the size of this beginning of this crack, would have, look, let's just go fly the aircraft. It's going to be fine. Maybe it would have been fine for some period of time. I don't know. But could you imagine saying, go do it? And these guys are flying it. You have tail boom failure. And that's one of those things you just don't want to experience. So, but what was so cool about it was that we're telling the board, and they're like, man, that thing's expensive. So I think if you remember, I had the tail boom brought to our board meeting. And we put the tail boom on display. And I asked every board member to go over to the tail boom and find the crack and let me know when they found it. And then we would come over and say, of course, not one of them found it. They had no appreciation. And we actually had the mechanic come in there and show them where she found it and how she found it. And for me, the point of doing that it wasn't to justify buying a tail boom. It was to get them to realize that if your staff aren't doing that, if they're not so engaged that they're willing to find something, even when it's small, report it, you're asking for trouble. But it was great. So yeah, it was an expensive repair, but it was a great learning for the board. I think the board really appreciated being able to see visual hands-on what we're talking about when we say a safety culture. These people are going to bring these things up, and it's our obligation then to support them. They brought it up. It's real.
And there's the genesis of a learning organization, right from the very, very top, all the way down to the front line of this person that says, it's validated. I found it. We're learning from it.
Yep.
Thank you very much. My gosh.
What a disaster that could have been. But look, McKenzie did a great job. I loved it. I think the board actually, from that point forward, had a better appreciation for not only the quality and safety and culture standards, but also the intricacy of what work needs to take place to do those jobs.
We will leave off here for this week and pick back up next week to finish this amazing interview. Until then, stay safe.
This podcast is brought to you by Baldwin Safety and Compliance, the leader in safety management for the transportation industry. Since 2004, Baldwin has been providing state-of-the-art solutions and 24/7 support to the aviation and transportation industries. Baldwin's clients include all sizes and types of transportation operators. Baldwin provides safety and related business services to commercial and non-commercial transportation operators, medical transporters, FBOs, MROs, airports, flight schools, UAS operators, firefighters, OEMs, ground transport operators, and others. Visit BaldwinSMS.com to discover how Baldwin can enhance your organization's safety program.